Billy, thank you for having us. This is an honor, so thank you. Morrow Insurance Agency, headquartered in Hendersonville, North Carolina. We have been around since 1919. We actually started out in the surety bonds and real estate business and have transformed from that. We've got two main offices.
102 years old. Did I do that math
102
right?
years old, yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And we have a secondary office in Marion, North Carolina, and about 33 associates. We are in the property and casualty, personal lines, benefits, life and health, business estate planning, and individual estate planning as well.
Okay. So what's the product split in the agency? Personal lines
commercial,
versus commercial, all that.
Commercial 70%, personal lines is 15%, and benefits in life is another 15% to round it out.
Thank you for taking time out of your day to listen to this information and wisdom-packed audio session. This session is taught by Dr. Billy R. Williams, CEO of the Williams Family Investment Group. Currently, a group of 160-plus partner insurance agencies that generate over $1 billion a year in new and renewal insurance premiums. Make sure you download this session to your mobile device so you can listen and re-listen at your convenience.
Hey guys, this is Billy Williams with the Fix My Insurance Agency podcast. I'm so honored today to have one of the agencies that I'm lucky enough to work with. And also I'm lucky enough to have all of the leaders of the agency in one place. So that getting you guys together at one time was the most difficult part of this whole journey, getting ready for this. As you guys know, this is the Fix My Insurance Agency podcast. No BS, no fluff. We're talking to real agencies with real problems about real solutions with real experts. So we want to jump right in. I don't like to waste a lot of time. So with that being said, I'm happy to have the Morrow Agency. And Morrow, I'll let you tell your story, where are you guys located, and kind of walk through your journey, please.
Well, Billy, thank you for having us. This is an honor, so thank you. Morrow Insurance Agency, headquartered in Hendersonville, North Carolina. We have been around since 1919. We actually started out in the surety bonds and real estate business and have transformed from that. We've got two main offices.
102 years old. Did I do that math right?
102 years old, yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And we have a secondary office in Marion, North Carolina, and about 33 associates. We are in the property and casualty, personal lines, benefits, life and health, business estate planning, and individual estate planning as well.
Okay. So what's the product split in the agency? Personal lines versus commercial, all that.
Commercial 70%, personal lines is 15%, and benefits in life is another 15% to round it out.
Okay, so you're really a heavy commercial book. What's your specialty? What's your niche in commercial? Or do you
we've got several. Yeah, we do. We have several. We have construction. We have camps, the summer camp industry, and schools, and then crop insurance. Those would be our three main.
How long has the average employee been with your agency?
We've got some steady employment numbers, and I don't have that specific number in front of me, but I can tell you I've been here for 25 years, and I'm about number 6 or 7 on the docket. We've got someone that's been here for 36 or 37 years, and all the way down to some folks that we just hired literally this week.
Okay. And so tell us, these other two handsome gentlemen that are sitting here, who are these folks?
Well, we've got Terry Robinson on my left, and Terry's very critical to our IT and really overall strategy perspective. And then we've got Jim Patterson on my right, and Jim's our COO, and his main responsibilities are investing in our team, focusing on sales, accountability, and then between the two of them, a huge effort is focused on processes, workflows, and best practices.
Gotcha.
Big responsibility between the two of them.
So what's your approximate annual revenue for the agency?
We're right around 6 million.
Right around 6 million revenue. Okay, excellent. So you're not you're not a beginning agency, obviously, and you guys have some senior staff, some tenured staff. So what are the main problems that you guys are dealing with that's keeping you from being the agency you want to be, say 5 years from now?
I'll jump in on that. I joined the agency 2 years ago, and when I came on board, kind of interviewed each employee individually just to kind of find out more about them, their experience, questions about the agency. And the quickest thing that jumped out at me is probably 80% of our employees felt that we were a service agency and not a sales agency. So that's been a big hurdle for us to try to shift the culture here to where we're more of a sales agency versus a service agency. And secondly, when we started talking more about sales and being sales driven and the sales initiative, I think the perception was that service would suffer just because we're focusing more on sales. And it's been the exact opposite. We are focusing more on sales, but I would argue that our customer service and the customer experience has actually improved greatly.
Okay. Now I started working with you guys a little over a year ago, right, Terry? It was about a little over a year ago?
A year and a half. Yeah.
Okay. One of the first things that I saw when I walked in and we started our journey, our mentoring journey, was exactly what you just said. Everybody was service, but what they didn't realize was that true service of a customer is offering them the coverage that's going to best protect their quality of life should they ever have a claim. That's what customers really, really want, not just trying to make them happy or trying to make them feel good or trying to find them a cheaper price or whatever else. And so that was one of the first culture shifts that I had to do. The first real movement of the needle was when we shifted to agency standards. Instead of relying on every single person to feel what they needed to say or figure out what they needed to say, we came up with a baseline where these were the agency standards. So Terry, since I started dealing with that process with you first, can you tell us in your own words what your initial thoughts were when I first said, no, we're going to go to an agency standard, and how you watched that progress over time?
Well, when we first started talking agency standards, everyone we were working with our personal lines people, and everyone said, yeah, we've got agency standards and we all know the standards. Well, we quickly found out we didn't know the standards and each person wasn't on the same page. And when we did our first round of agency standards, we started putting things together, we got different pushback from people. Oh, we can't ask them to do that much, or we shouldn't do that. So we started kind of slow, had our first version of agency standards, maybe version 1. And then we progressed into more of a version 2 that got a little more detailed. And we're at a version 3 that's even a little more detailed than that kind of goes down into some specifics. And we're not there yet. We're still in progress.
Right.
You know, the thing is that the big thing that happened is, like you said, it took the pressure off of each person because it wasn't, you know, Betty Lou's idea of what the customer should have. We've decided this is an agency. We have it. She has it in front of her. This is what we expect of her. And, you know, it gave people a lot of relief, I think, knowing what's expected instead of leaving that vague, because, you know, as we get into more things, I think that's been one of our areas where not providing clear expectations has been, well, we've just not benefited like we should.
Gotcha. Now, for you listeners, when we say agency standards, what we're saying is every single person in the agency understands, let's talk personal lines. The minimum recommended coverage for a customer may be $250,500. Okay, every customer. Now, that doesn't mean that every single customer is going to get $250,500 or buy $250,500, but we're going to recommend $250,500 for every single customer. So JP, let me come to you on this one. Once we put the standards in place, that was cool and that was fine, and you know, that was good, and we started training people like, ooh. But then the next thing we put in place was the decline coverage form, saying if you're going to offer the standard and the person is going to decline the standard, you now have to have accountability for you and for that person by putting the decline coverage form. So JP, what kind of pushback or thoughts do you think happened once we put the decline coverage form in place?
Well, just like any other change, at first there was some resistance. There's always resistance to change. And first, with our standards, after we set them, did everybody believe in them on the team? And once they did, then they should never feel guilty about recommending those standards to our clients. In fact, we owe it to them to recommend those. And if they chose not to meet those standards, we do send the decline coverage. And at first, as we did auditing, Terry and I would audit. A lot of times that decline coverage form may not go out, and it really just took a lot of steady persistence and constant reinforcement that this is the way the agency is going to go. It's not going to change. It's not program of the month or program of the quarter. This is where we're going. And soon people started realizing that. And then it just let the process take care of itself and let it sell itself is what happened, is they started sending those decline coverage forms and created that second thought within our clients. And a lot of times they say, maybe I should take that coverage that you recommended. And what we have found is it takes a little longer to get these processes in place, but once they get in place, they actually sell themselves. We become more comfortable with them. It becomes second nature to everybody.
Now, one of the things you said, two things there I really want to peel back the onion on. First and foremost, accountability. That's one of the things, guys, that made this all work the way that it's working. We'll talk real numbers here in a second, Agent, so that you know we're not just talking, oh, it was great. No, we'll talk real numbers. But one of the things that really worked was the fact that Terry and JP and JR were really all about that accountability. I mean, we would meet and I would spot check, and then you guys would have your meetings outside of meeting with me, and then you would spot check, and then and I think what you just said is so true. The fact that they understood, oh, this isn't going away. This isn't a flavor of the month. You know, this is going to be here for a while. The second thing you said, the processes sold themselves. Listeners, listen to me. Viewers, however you're watching this, YouTube, podcast, audio, whatever. Stop trying to get your people to buy in. Okay? Stop trying to get your people to buy in. You put the process in place. The buy-in will come from the success. So JR, I'd like for you to talk about that. The whole buy-in versus the success piece. Can you kind of touch on that for me?
Well, I think part of it has to do with tied in and related to what JP was saying, Billy, in the sense of slowing down, or it might have been Terry, slowing down and repeat and repeat and repeat. The more we did that, the more evidence of the fact that that process works and that concept works, and that automatically leads to the buy-in.
Exactly. Guys, so again, stop trying to get your people to buy in and then put the process in place. You put the process in place, and the success of the process will generate the buy-in. Would you guys all agree with that?
Absolutely.
I would, and I would also, Billy, I'd also say is what we've learned going through this process is set the expectation for the agency, provide the training, that's very critical, provide the tools that they'll need. Terry works very hard, a lot of automation that we put in place. Be a resource when it's needed, and then the accountability. On the back end is that accountability, the auditing to make sure that we're doing what we say. Trust but verify. So
I use this acronym. You guys have heard this a million times. S4TS. Okay. S4TS. The first S is standards. That's the first thing that agencies really need in their agency. They need standards so that your staff knows these are the recommended coverages. These are the recommended actions. These are the reactions when people don't take our recommendations. So we put those in. Now, let me stop on the S before we move on to the 4 T's. When we first started, like every other agency I work with, I remember you guys were saying, these 2 weeks, we're going to get this process in place. And then we're going to come back 2 weeks later and put this process in place. And then we're going to come back 2 weeks later and put this process in place. And what I do as a mentor it's almost like a parent. I'll go, okay, because for me to tell you it won't work, now all of a sudden it's just going to be, well, it's going to take too long. So I just kind of had to sit back and let you guys try to do this real rush job with the process. And then quickly we realized we can't put all this stuff in place that quickly. So Terry, since you were the one that was the key on this before we move to the 4 T's and the S, don't worry guys, I haven't forgot it. Terry, can you touch on that a little bit more about slowing down? I know you mentioned it earlier, but what your expectations were in the beginning versus your expectation now about implementing a process?
Well, you know, in the beginning, you're right. It seemed pretty obvious. Let's just do it this way, boom, 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 and move on. And like I'm sure most insurance agents out there, people don't want to change that quickly. People don't want to change at all. And, you know, people have been doing this. Our people, even if they're new hires to us, most of them have been in the industry for several years prior. So they've already established ways of doing things. And to ask them to do something differently, it stresses them out.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, we had some, I hate to say mini meltdowns, but, you know, just asking someone to do something differently. Sending a confirmation email and pointing out a policy weakness. We heard dozens of excuses why we couldn't do that until finally it just had to kind of come down as this is the way we're going to do it. Send the email and this isn't going to change. We've had our discussion.
Now you said a mini meltdown, but didn't that mini meltdown happen on both sides? Like, didn't your staff have a mini meltdown? But wasn't it JR or JP that had a mini meltdown too and said, damn it, this is the way it's going to be. You might as well get used to it. Who was that?
That was JP. that was me, JP, that kind of had a meltdown and finally just said, this is the way we're going to do it.
So JP, talk
That's
about
correct.
that, because a lot of agents, they need that meltdown moment where their staff knows, oh, they're serious. It's almost like mom or dad yelling at you when they start calling you by all of your name, you know, Billy, Ruben, Devon, Williams, if you don't get in here, I mean, you kind of have to have that moment. So can you tell us about what triggered that meltdown? And don't worry, guys, I haven't forgot the 4 T's and the S. Listeners are like, when's he getting to that? Don't worry, I'm going to get to it. But can you tell us about that mini meltdown that related to the standards and you saying, this is the way it is?
Well, it was in our endorsement change process. And in that process, we always send an email to let the client know that we have made the endorsement change that needed to be taken care of. And we point out a policy weakness if there is a policy weakness. And if there isn't, we let them know that we reviewed the client's policies and everything looked good. And as Terry said, it was just one excuse after another when we do our audit on why it didn't take place. And it finally got to a point where this is not negotiable. And I think my words were, just send the damn email.
Right.
And so I think from that point on, there was clarity that we're going to follow the processes. We listen to our folks when we put these processes in place. They have feedback, but eventually we make the final decision, and this is what we're going to do. And we're developing the Morrow way. Not only do we want to make the customer experience better, make it consistent, we're also striving to develop, as we're developing all of our processes and workflows, is a training manual so that we can grow our own people organically. Yes. And we're starting that. We just started within the last month of organically growing our first individual on the personal line side and on the commercial line side. But again, that starts with all the infrastructure, the processes, the workflows, and the standards. Those have to be in place so that we're consistent across the board throughout the agency.
Excellent. So the first S is standards. Then it comes to the 4 T's, which are time, task, tools, and training. So time, I remember the very first session we had when I started having people pick the time that they were going to do their KPI. So here's how the process works for you guys that are listening. We pick the 4 tasks that generate the most revenue for each role in the agency. Each person has a role. So we pick the 4 tasks that generate the most revenue. Then we block off the time for that person to do the number 1 revenue producing task, right? So maybe that's conducting policy reviews. Maybe that's doing cancellation termination. Maybe that's prospecting, whatever that is, whatever the number 1 revenue producing task in that particular role. So when we talked about time, that very first time that we did this, we had everyone pick their hours. You're going to do 9 to 11, 1 to 3, 4 to whatever. And then we came back and spot checked it, and nobody was sticking to the schedule. Remember that, Terry? Like literally nobody was sticking to the schedule, and they all had excuses about how things got busy and we were so this, and we were like, look, this is the priority. End of story. This is priority. You got to do this task during this time. So let's talk about that, JR, if you can jump in on this one. One, how difficult that was to get people to block their time. 2, what does that process look like now compared to what it looked like in the beginning, that time blocking?
Billy, I'm going to respectfully throw that out to one of the other 2 because I'm not involved at that level.
Okay.
So I wasn't involved in those discussions.
I would tell you that, as you said, the first audits we did, they had the time blocked out, but they weren't doing, we call it their big rocks. They weren't addressing those big rocks in the time that was allocated out. They were doing emails or catching up. So we actually narrowed that down, I think maybe to 3 rather than 4. Again, they were saying they were under a time crunch. But if they address those big rocks, if they block that time out and address those big rocks, that took care of, I don't know, 70% of what their day is and the big things that their challenges are daily. On personal lines, I think we've made a lot of strides on that side where we're doing that. It's a work in progress still on our commercial line side. But again, I think it's about auditing, making sure we're doing it, and then let the process sell itself. And sometimes we get so busy we can't see the trees for the forest, so to speak. And I think that as they block out time, and again, we're just partially way through this journey. We know there's still some times that they get away from actually doing what they blocked that time out for, but we're getting better. And that's the critical thing. We're moving forward and getting better each week.
Gotcha. So the first S is standards. The first T is time. The next T are task. So I brought in these workflows, I brought in these processes as part of Inspire Nation. And the very first process that we did was the endorsement process, because that's 90% of what happens in your agency, right? Is our endorsements, payments, mortgagee changes, all those kind of things. And we really only asked them to do 2 things. 1, point out a policy weakness based on the agency standards. And 2, send a confirmation email, right? Those are the 2 things that we asked them to do. But Terry, when you first did your spot check, can you tell us what that felt like when you first did that spot check, knowing we only asked you to do 2 things, point out a policy weakness and send a confirmation email?
Well, the first ones were not that good, and it was amazing. Well, I couldn't tell them they had a policy weakness. Their husband died and they're taking their name off of it, or, what do I do? I'm supposed to point out a policy weakness. If their house is burned down, they're calling us. I mean, we catastrophized everything. But we had to kind of come in and, through a lot of your guidance, help people get their emotions under control. So it wasn't about them. It wasn't about what was going on. It was just do it. And we could see that our audits would improve. But then we fell off the wagon a couple of times. And,
When you say we, are we talking
along
about the leadership fell off the wagon or the team fell off the wagon?
Well, I consider us part of the team, but the team fell off the wagon as far as following through, because we get and start those habits, but then maybe something would come up and we'd get busy, they'd get busy and not do it, and again, start having those excuses, and then the audit would go down. So it was back and forth for a little while.
But
We
you
had a
never
series of
stopped
public-
auditing. You never stopped auditing, right? Because you were able to catch when those processes were not being worked or utilized properly, correct?
That's correct. We started really slow, and the audits were poor, or average at best. And then we went about a month or so, and we would audit weekly. Terry and I have to calendar block time for ourselves also. And we would do those audits, and we went 4 to 6 weeks with really good, strong audits. And we consider a successful audit that 80% of the endorsement changes or the renewal process or whatever that process we're auditing, that they score at least 80 or greater. And then all of a sudden we had about 2 weeks where we just fell back into the 50s. And we really didn't know why. We went back and retrained. We went back to that process that we felt like we had mastered and had it under control. We went back and retrained on those. And I would argue we haven't had an endorsement change process audit that's been below the 80% for any of the individuals. It's been months. And so it became second nature. And again, I think they start to see the value in the process. That's the key, is they start to see the value in the process, and we're protecting the client. And so I think that audit's what I would tell any of the other agents out there. You have to go behind an audit to make sure that the things that we're trying to do are being done.
And an audit, guys, we mean spot check. And we don't mean you have to micromanage every single detail. Like, you guys weren't looking at every transaction and looking at everything. You were just randomly picking different transactions and taking a look at them, right?
That's correct.
We usually look at maybe 4 or 5, and, if they were doing good on the 4 or 5 we chose, why keep looking?
Exactly.
If they were getting those 4 or 5 right, then we assumed they were kind of keeping things along the way. And then if they didn't get 1 or 2 right, we keep looking to try to get their average a little better. See, well, let's look at a couple more, see if that's a trend or not. And, try to give people the benefit of the doubt. And, look for success. We're not looking for failure.
Exactly. So, guys, real important. We're not trying to get you to micromanage your people where you're looking at every single transaction that happens. Like you said, pick some random transactions. We'll go through. We'll look at 4 or 5 endorsements. Like Terry said, if the first 3 are good, why do I need to keep looking? Obviously, they're doing it right. So don't get carried away with that. So let's turn this into money.
Something really does come up.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Terry.
Let me just say one more thing. Occasionally, they do have a really good justification for not doing it. And if they document that justification, they get a pass.
Yeah.
Right.
Because, we're not treating them like children. You have to do it this way every time. They're professionals, and they have a certain judgment, and, we trust their judgment on a few things, on things like that. So,
Exactly.
You got to let your people do what they need to do.
Right. So you give them the parameters, and then you let them work within the parameters. But there are always going to be outliers, always going to be things that just don't work for whatever reason. And that's fine. It's like, but what you said was key. As long as you can go into that customer's records and look at the notes and see why this wasn't done. Okay. So let's turn this into money. Because for us, everything in the, let's be honest, we're in business to make money, to be profitable, so we can pass those profits on to our community and other things and jobs. And I know you can't give me an exact, but can you, from a revenue standpoint, talk about the difference between not having agency standards and having agency standards? And I'll give you some leeway on this. You can either take it from how much money we were leaving on the table, because we did that little exercise, or what you started to see when people were actually mentioning weaknesses and customers updating and upgrading their policies. However you want to break it down, that's fine. But what kind of revenue effect did you see from the process?
Well, we haven't gotten to the level of really tracking revenue, but we could see certain trends going on. One of our people who really didn't like to sell, all of a sudden we started seeing her recommending umbrellas. And then we started getting some umbrellas on policies that we didn't have before. Saying, hey, you don't meet the standards, or hey, we recommend that you have $50 in towing versus $35. Some of that's just little, minor revenues things, but it all adds up. It's all cumulative. And whenever we sat down, I guess it's been a month or so ago, kind of looking at the level of what we don't have on the revenue. And whenever I'm saying that, I'm saying, okay, we have this many auto policies that we don't have a homeowners or renters policy for.
Mm-hmm.
We have this many homeowners policies that we don't have their auto, or either one of those where we're not carrying an umbrella. The amount, and forgive me for not remembering that amount off the top of my head.
Well, I remember it was over $300,000 in revenue.
It represented basically almost 200% of our annual goal for the entire department.
So,
And that,
you know,
and that was within your book. That I want agents to understand this. This wasn't them buying leads or getting telemarketing companies or going. This was money that literally was sitting in their book that just needed to be talked about. And the policy weaknesses gave us an opportunity. What were we going to say, Terry?
well, and, you know, we're not naive enough to think we're actually going to sell every one of those.
Exactly.
But there's certainly, you know, is it 50%? Is it 30%? Is it 60%? There's enough money to go after there where it's serious change, and we need to pursue it. And I think it was just a big eye opener for everyone
Right.
to see, you know.
Agents, you need to do that. You need to sit down. You take your premium per line. So if it's let's say it's homeowners, you take your total amount of revenue, not premium, your total amount of revenue, and divide that by the number of homes that you have, and that'll tell you your average revenue per home. And then go into your book and go, well, how many auto policies do we have that don't have a home? And that's going to tell you the revenue potential that's on the table. Now, we cut everything in half because we're not stupid. We know we're not going to sell 100% of everybody. So we just cut it in half. But even cutting that number in half, it was $150,000 in revenue that potentially was out there and, you know, that we could grab. By setting those agency standards, that made it comfortable for people to have the conversation to uncover that revenue, to dig that revenue out of your book, while better protecting the customer. So JR, I'd really like for you to talk about this because I love how you elegantly put this when we talked about different things. That whole make more money while protecting the customer. Can you kind of give me your feel for that, your viewpoint on that?
Well, first and foremost, the protecting the customer aspect is obviously the most important thing. As you've mentioned before, we're in business, obviously, and part of business is revenue. How you break it down into such simple blocks of understanding helps our team pursue that, which then gives us a better chance of success in protecting the customer and then also bringing the revenue in.
Okay. Have you seen more referrals from customers? Have you guys noticed that by switching to the standards and the policy weaknesses and all that? Do you seem to get more referrals, less referrals, or have you noticed any kind of trend there?
Client referrals?
Yes, sir.
I don't know that we've actually measured that. It would be subjective. I think we do, but I don't know that we've got we've quantified that. There's a number of things like that we're working on, some of our KPIs. One of the ones that kind of comes to mind was we were just talking about home, auto, and the umbrella. In 22, we will have a KPI where we're measuring what percentage of our book has all three of those lines that we're going to stress this year. So we can measure as we go through renewals throughout the year, or we go through an endorsement change and we bring these weaknesses or that they don't have all three lines, and we can see that go up. I don't think we've quantified client referrals where we're measuring that currently.
Well, I know we did it per individual staff person, because remember we had that one staff, I don't want to say her name, but we had that one staff person who suddenly her referrals were just through the roof, as well as her testimonials. You remember that?
Yes.
Because can you talk about that? Because to me, a testimonial is a referral. So can you talk about that, the staff person who did that?
That's actually kind of two issues. We have had, an internal referral program in place where we're asking our employees to bring referrals in, whether it's, in your department, yeah, if you're chasing something in your commercial, but bring in a personal lines, or bring in something for benefits, or bring something for an individual life and health. Whoever you know and want to bring in. So just internally, whenever we've made contact, bring something in, and although you're not going to benefit directly from it in most cases, the whole agency will. And because we're an ESOP, everyone does end up benefiting from it in the end. So, just the attitude of trying to bring more things in for the agency in general and being aware of those opportunities. And then the other part was, one of the things you taught us, especially on the endorsement process, is, if somebody's worked hard and done a good job for a client, you can ask them for a review. Ask them to do a Google review, a little testimonial on Google, and people were resistant to that at first. When I say people, I'm talking about our people, our employees. Oh, they didn't want to ask for anything. And then we started having this intentionality beginning about a year ago. It was the end of October we started looking at it. And in the last year, we've gotten over 150 Google reviews from different people. And some people really accelerate at it. Some people still don't ask. But, and people are saying wonderful things. But you have to ask. You can't just be passive about it and say, well, maybe they'll see a link to it on our website and give us a review. Ask. And especially in processes like when we look at the new customer process, when you've worked for that customer, you've found them good rates, you've advised them on good coverage, you make sure they have the good things, you've given them any declined coverage form and counsel them on that, you've helped them set up their client portal and everything, you've earned it at that point.
Yes.
You've done a lot of work.
Absolutely.
So, that's a great time to ask.
And what you just said there about the key is asking. One of the ways we made this a lot easier for your people was that, again, we tried to take the emotion out of it. We just made it part of the process. And Terry, this is where you were so instrumental in this. Everything that I asked you guys to do, you would go in, you'd create the checklist for everyone, even better than the checklist that I had. And then you'd give them the process. And when we trained it, they would just go down and check the box. Did I get this done? Did I get this done? Did I get that done? And that made it so much easier for your team because now they didn't have to memorize when to do it, how to do it, why to do it. They just went down the checklist, So Terry, since you're the key there, and we're actually moving to the next T, which is technology, our tools and our technology, which that's your forte. Can you talk about some of the things that you've done? I think you guys are using Epic, right? Is that your agency management system?
That's right.
Can you talk about some of the things that you've done with Epic and how you've made that easier for your team, especially your client portal, which I think is amazing. And I think a lot of Epic users don't even know that exists. CSR 24, I don't even think they know that exists. So can you talk about that and your journey with that technology?
Well, I'm going to back up just a little bit to, we had been on a legacy system for the past, 25 plus years, and it was just an outdated legacy agency management system. That's pretty much the best way to sum it up. And we knew there was a lot of things out there that we needed to be looking for. We did some surveys, saw where agents were texting. People were using electronic signatures. They were offering client portals. They were offering apps for the phone and everything. And when we were looking, we decided it was time to get a modern agency management system that could handle all those. And there are several good ones out there. We could have chosen a different management system than we did and still be in great shape.
Mm-hmm.
But we just happened to choose Epic because it had integrated accounting. So that was, one of our needs. And the big thing about moving to Epic was we had the attitude, we're not just going to learn what we need to get by. We want to utilize it. We want to utilize the tools. We want to learn as much as we can about it. And we want to keep improving with it. And, you know, with any change, it's a big nut to crack. And, you know, when Jim Patterson, we moved in, I guess it was June of 19 when we went to it. When Jim came on board in the fall of 19, he heard a lot of belly aching. Because, again, that all goes back into, oh, change. Why do we need to change, you know? And everything. But one of the things we did was a commitment to training. And, you know, we've been doing quarterly training with one of the Epic trainers and trying to learn how to use different features. And today, when we were working with her, you know, we confirmed that we've actually kind of graduated a little bit from the basics to some of the more advanced operations. And the pushback on the different features, oh no, clients won't use a client portal. Well, they are using a client portal. Oh, clients, you know, they can't issue their own certificates, we can't do things. Well, you know, you can reprint some certificates and maybe add and edit some holders. You know, a lot of things around here. Well, I'll use Jim Patterson for an example. He's got a sales background, and since he got here, he's had to do more selling than he ever did in his life. Selling everybody internally on how this is a good thing. And then it takes a while to convince them, but whenever they see the light and it clicks, that's when we start, you know, really moving the needle.
Right. Guys, one of the things that I want to really bring home, I'm technology agnostic, as you guys know, so I really don't care what agency management system you use or what technology you use. I'm more concerned about the end result. But one of the things you have to do, agents, is you just can't throw a piece of technology at your people and go, here, go use it. Okay. One of the things that really worked well was the fact that you guys were training, but the fact also that we put in specific processes. So our process said, you have to send a confirmation email. Now we went to the team and said, here's how you send a confirmation email in this system. And we train that. We have to sign the customer up for the client portal. Here's how you do this. So the fact that we made the technology, we didn't do technology and then figure out a process. We had a process and then figured out how to work that process in the technology. And I think that was so key and pivotal to the team, because now we weren't pushing a button just because it was a button. We were pushing a button because it had a purpose. Would you agree with that, Terry?
Part of it, we did. And a big part of that too was trying to make it as easy as possible. You know, send a confirmation email. Instead of somebody having to figure out what to say in an email, Billy provided us with confirmation email templates. And, you know, we may have tweaked it just a little bit to kind of make it ours, but that's the basis of the email. So they don't have to figure out, what do I need to say? This is what you need to say, and, you know, then change the specifics, which are the policy weaknesses. If we're going to send a text that has links to our electronic business cards or links to scheduling, we have that set up in templates, so all they have to do is go up and choose the correct template and send it out.
And you have it in text
they don't
and
have to come
email
up and
template.
figure it out.
You have it in
And
text
email
message
template.
and email template, right?
Right, we have text message templates, email templates. You know, try to make it easy for people to do, because the more difficult you make it for people to do, the less likely they are to do it. And even if they do it, attempt to do it, they'll mess it up.
Right. Well, the first time it gets hard, that's when they want to quit, right? I tried to do it. I couldn't figure it out. I remember you have one specific person was, if it was the slightest bit difficult, I can't do it. I can't do it. It won't happen. And yeah, I don't know if you guys remember this or not. I made her like my role play person. Every time we would start to train, she was my role play person. And the reason why I did that was not to pick on her. It was to say, if this person can figure it out, the rest of you have no excuse. So that leads us to training. What are some tips that you would give us or give to the listeners or viewers about training your people? because I know you guys train on a regular basis. What tips would you give us?
Go ahead, JP.
Well, you just said it. You got to train, and when you think that they've got it down, continue to train. Because as I told you earlier, we had that where we went about a 6-week period with everything looked good, and we dropped back off, and we went right back to training, right back to the basics. Ask questions. Is there something here that we're not getting? Is there a tool here that we're not providing? Backing up a little bit to the technology piece, Terry's made that as easy as we can for our users, our daily users, but an agency has to make a commitment that we've made to have somebody on staff like we've got the best in Terry. And I don't say that just because he's here, because there's a lot of work to do the behind the scenes things that Terry works out before we ever introduce the process to our team. And so there's some heavy lifting that goes on that side. And then back to the training is just continue to train, role play. We've learned from you to do a lot of role play, and then also let the students be the teachers.
Yes.
That if Terry and I teaching the processes, let them teach it to each other. And I think that's been a big part of our success is for Terry and I to back away and let the team teach each other the processes.
Yeah, I remember when we first started talking about that, and I said, guys, here's the deal. I'll train it initially, but then we're going to turn right around and let everybody else train, because you don't know it if you can't train it. That's how I look at it. And what that did was, I remember the first couple of times we did that, people were kind of freaking out. What do you mean I'm going to train? But then they had to go deeper into the process. So agents, that's one of the first things I was telling you about training is, don't you always be the trainer. Train them and then turn around and let them train you or train the rest of the team, especially your weakest people. I don't know if you guys remember this or not. I said, I want the weakest person to be the trainer. Okay. That wasn't to pick on the weakest person. It was to force the weakest person to have to put the work in to learn what they were going to train. Agents, that's so important. So first, that's the standards. Then we have our time, we have our task, we have our tools and technology, we have our training. And then the last S is spot checking, which you guys are amazing at spot checking. Now, it hasn't all been rosy, and it's still not rosy, right? Let's be honest. I don't want viewers to think, oh, these guys are just on here saying everything is peachy keen. And no, it's not. We've had a lot of work. We've had people quit, correct? We've had staff that have quit because they didn't want the change. We've had people that complained and people that whatever. Some people you had to move into different roles because they weren't a good fit in the role that they were in. So you found a different place for them. So this is not all about, everything was easy and everything was this. So without taking any more of their time, because I know they're always interested in three things. One, Billy, how did this turn out revenue-wise? Two, how did this turn out retention-wise? And three, how did this turn out staff-wise? So let's kind of close on those three topics. Number one, revenue-wise. Can you see a growth in your revenue because you've put processes, standards, training? Has it turned into additional revenue for the agency?
I'll jump in. Well, we've been working with you mostly on the personal line side. We're on the commercial now, and I would tell you the last 2 years has been the best revenue years we've had for our personal line side. New business-wise, rounding out accounts, the last two have been the two best as far as I can find any numbers back. So that's probably a 20-year period that I've looked back, have been our best 2 years. Good. So we see the impact on revenue.
Okay, so now let's talk about retention, because again, this is what agents are concerned with. Can you see any impact on retention over the last 2 years?
We haven't specifically measured retention because that's been kind of a bear of a calculation that we're still trying to get our heads against to get it accurate, because we didn't want to throw out inaccurate calculations. But we do feel like there are less general issues where we're dropping the ball or not following through with things over the years. Our people are getting stronger at doing that, and I'd say our retention numbers are pretty good.
Okay.
And whenever I say pretty good, that's all subjective.
Right. Now, one of the things I want to remind the viewers is when a customer voluntarily, JR and I talked about this. Okay. And JR, in fact, if you want to be the one to talk about this, please go ahead.
No, well, I was just going to say, when we are able to point, let's just take standards as an example. There's many examples, but let's just take the minimum standards as an example. When we point out a policy weakness, and the customer sees that, and they understand, and we're able to explain the consequences of what happens if they don't purchase that minimum standard, they understand. And again, as we've talked about, they don't always buy it. Okay, purchase that additional amount to get to the agency minimum standards. But when they do, that creates a stronger bond between us and the customer, which then translates into, I believe, on average, a 3 years longer relationship, and it's a win-win all around. There is no loser in that equation. Exactly. And back to your point, we're protecting the client as the best possible way in the event they have a claim.
So guys, when a customer voluntarily increases their premium because of your recommendation, that customer stays with you on average 3 renewals longer. 3 renewals longer. That's across the industry. So the fact that you guys are now doing standards and decline coverage forms and policy weaknesses and all that, and when you start tracking your retention numbers, I know it's only been 1.5 years, 2 years, but when you start tracking those 3-year, 5-year retention numbers, you're going to see those numbers increase simply because those customers are going to be with you longer. They're going to season themselves. You're going to have more seasoned customers over time because I can get a cheaper policy. And that's an awesome feeling when a customer tells another agent, hell, if I wanted a cheaper policy, my agent would give me a cheaper policy. I don't want a cheaper policy. I want a better policy. And that's what you want to compete against, right? You want to be the agency that everyone holds that standard to. So well,
we want to be consultants.
Good.
Yep.
And we want to be consultants and counselors, not order takers.
Yes, sir.
And that was one of the paradigm shifts. Our job isn't to find them the cheapest price, period. Our job is to recommend what's going to cover them best, show them their options, and let the customer decide what they want to pay for. But they need to be involved in the decision, and that's one of the things that the industry has done a poor job with. You can turn on, I don't care how you flip the TV, but we can save you money, and that's what people are conditioned. But saving them money doesn't necessarily have them protected like they should be protected, and they're not making an informed decision.
Right. And that's why when I first came in, my whole mindset, and we talked about this, my whole mindset was to get it off money and get it onto the claim. Because in insurance, we're about the claim. The basis of everything we do in insurance should be focused on if our customer were to file a claim, what would happen? What coverage would they have? What protections would they have? How long would those protections last? That's what it's really all about. And if agents can just shift their mentality from worrying about a customer being upset because of premium into this is what's going to best protect you from a claim standpoint. And I think that's the shift. So let's talk about staff and then let these guys get back to work. That was my number one goal with your agency, was shifting the focus from money to claim. Has that happened? And what do you think the turning point was if that has happened?
JP.
Well, it has happened. I think we all on the leadership team realize that we've kind of had that aha moment that they see the value in what we're doing and being more consultative and explaining consequences and offering the coverages to best protect our clients if they should have a claim. You probably heard that somewhere. And so I think they know that. I would tell you, when we go through this process, you're going to lose a few employees. Some are just not going to be up for it, and some are going to leave. And That's never was our intention, or we want it to be our intention, but it's just going to happen. But we've kind of gotten through that step of the process within our agency, and very confident that everybody we have now sees the value in what we're doing, and we're just building on it. We're really excited about how much we're building on where we were a year ago and where we're headed.
Okay, unlicensed staff. Can you guys touch on how you're better utilizing, or how you're utilizing, I don't want to put words in your mouth, how you're utilizing unlicensed staff today compared to how you were utilizing them a year ago?
Well, we still like to have people in licensed positions, but when we're doing things just to have all the protection. But right now we're utilizing 2 virtual assistants. They're 2 half-time people. They're doing a lot of our certificate work, doing some endorsement work, and
no, they're not
doing
processing the endorsements, right? They're just filling in the information for the endorsements, because I don't want to do anything illegal. I mean, they're not actually processing and binding the endorsement.
That's why we have people then licensed, but yes, they're doing the processing work, the background work on that to make that happen. And we put in a model here. We talked about it for a while, and it took us a while to get the right people in, where our front desk reception area, we had someone who wanted to progress and learn more. So we kind of took a page and said, okay, what happens if we make her half-time receptionist, and then have her being a CSR for our commercial lines, and then have someone else come in to do the other part-time of that receptionist job and be a CSR on our personal line side. And those ladies have both started getting into their roles, and the account managers are actually trusting them, because, a lot of account managers have trust issues from the standpoint they don't think anybody can do it quite as good as they can, or quite as accurate, or will get it done. And, we've got good people in there, and they're trusting the people to go ahead and take care of it. And they keep earning that trust. They're following through. Gotcha. So, getting people to kind of let go of some of their babies so that they've got more bandwidth to do the real account manager type tasks. So they're not as transactional, that they're looking for the policy weaknesses, pointing it out on the workups, so that when the producer goes out, if it's the commercial side or if it's on the personal side, so they've got time to actually conduct those account reviews that we all know that we need to do, but a lot of times it's hard to find time to make it happen.
Gotcha. So you're utilizing your unlicensed people to go in to pull the policy, because I want to make sure they're clear on this process. Your unlicensed people are going in, pulling the renewal, going through the policies, looking for weaknesses that don't match the agency standards, and then taking that information and passing it on to the CSRs. Is that what they're doing?
The CSRs, yes.
So they're freeing up 20 or 30% of the time that the CSRs would normally spend doing that initial review. Is that correct?
That's correct. And even on some of the other, like new customer process, their CSR, they can help walk a client through downloading a mobile app and getting it set up on their phone, and give them instructions on how to use the client portal, because they're not representing insurance or talking about coverages. They're saying, hey, press this button on your phone to get it there. Hey, this is your password.
Well, we've even got more granular with our processes and assign certain tasks. So a certain activity can have 5 different tasks, and we've even identified 3 of these are going to be done by a CSR, and the other 2 are going to be done by an account manager. And then once they're all done, the account manager is held accountable for the activity, but there are certain tasks within that activity that we're handing off to an unlicensed or a CSR to do that work for them. So we really got granular. Terry's gone in and even in our workflows, identified where those are in each activity, so that everybody understands what needs to be done and nothing slipping through the cracks. We're clear on what the account manager does and what the CSR does.
Gotcha. All right. So let's go around the room and let's finish up. So here I am. I'm an agent. I'm watching this video podcast, and I'm like, man, this is awesome. I like what these guys are doing, but I'd really like to just kind of get a summary of what each one of them thinks about growing an agency going forward. So let's start with you, JR. What advice would you give to agents that are watching this podcast that want to make a change in their agency, that are afraid of their staff, afraid of the changes that their staff are going to do? What advice would you give them?
I would say, first of all, have the courage to ask difficult questions, and not of the staff starting out, but ask difficult questions of leadership. I think so many times it's easy to stick your head in the sand, and that is, where are we now? Where do we need to be? What's the industry doing? Where's the industry going? Change is inevitable. Whether you embrace it or not, change is happening. So I love a quote that's change can either paralyze or energize. The choice is yours. So we've made the decision to be intentional in being energetic about change, and that's a process. So we're not where we'd like to be, but we're well on our way. Execute and stay committed. So once you answered those questions and figured out where you want to go, just execute and stay committed, because it's not, I think both Jim and Terry might have referenced it. You're going to hit some bumps, and that's going to happen often, especially early on. And just stay committed to the task. If you believe in what you're doing, stay committed and continue to execute.
Excellent. JP, same thing for you. What would you tell an agent watching this that wants to make a change in their agency?
Well, I would say, first of all, you have to look at the agency as a sales agency, first and foremost. And that doesn't mean you're compromising on the customer experience and the service part of the agency. And that means providing professional insurance options and doing it unashamedly. And then also having all of your associates recognize opportunities. We want all of our folks out there looking for opportunities. They may refer that or get the right person in front of them, whether it's a personal lines opportunity, if it's a benefits opportunity, get Jim involved with it. If it's a commercial lines, get with me, I'll get a producer out there. But we have to have all of our associates out there looking for opportunities for us to grow. And then I think probably is just embrace the automation that's going on in the industry, because it's going to continue. You have to embrace the automation that's out there. It's tough. I'm not big on automation myself, but I'm learning, and you have to stay committed, as Jim said, and just keep moving forward, be persistent, and just unwilling to compromise and move forward, I guess.
Okay. And Terry, yours is a little different because you're on the tech side and you do all the, all that fancy stuff. What is it that agents need to fear when it comes to technology, and what is it that they should embrace when it comes to technology?
Well, it's hard to have a balance with technology, because you don't want to buy and try to do something because you're afraid somebody else will get ahead of you. But you want to be intentional with what you do. You want to try to make sure you're putting in things of value. And when it comes to a lot of these operations, everybody will try to sell you something that is going to solve all your problems. This one thing is going to take care of everything you need. And fact is, there is no magic bullet. And it's hundreds, if not thousands, of details that you have to really take care of and ride, just like our agency management system. Any agency management system, it's got hundreds of settings and tweaks, and sometimes it's just as simple as changing a setting so that when a producer adds a new client, it automatically puts their name in as producer. May not come out of the box that way, but you have to set that setting. Just all those little settings to make it easier. And then that collective start saving enough time so that people can get used to it, because you have to look at technology not as an expense, but as a profit center, as an employee, as you put it. And they have to be providing their service for the technology. They have to be justifying their expense just like an employee does. And you can't look at it as an expense. You have to look at what is it going to do for us? How is it going to get us to the next level? How is it going to provide a better customer experience? And, you know, just what can it do for us? And you have to be committed to get in there and fight with it and use it.
Gotcha.
At every level.
Gotcha. So guys, S4TS, standards, time, task, tools, training, and spot checking. Let me say that again. You want to change your agency, adopt this S4TS model. Set standards, block off time to do important things, have the right tasks, the right workflows, know what your team is supposed to do, have the right KPIs. Then you have to make sure you got the right tools. And don't just have tools to have tools. There's some agencies that have 50 different tools that they never use. I don't care if you have one that you use all the time, but pick the tool that's going to get the job done, not just pick a tool just because you can afford a new tool. And then training, retraining, the retraining of the retraining, right? And spot checking. Because if you train something and you don't spot check it, you might as well not have trained it. That's what it takes to really make a change in your agency. Thank you, Morrow Agency. I'm so honored that you would allow me to be part of your success team, first and foremost. And thank you for taking the time out of your day to sit and talk with us and share some of your wisdom and expertise with the agents that are listening to this. And more importantly, I'm excited for where you guys are going to go the next 102 years of the Morrow Agency. So, Jim Patterson, thank you so much. JR, thank you so much. Terry, thank you so much. Absolutely appreciate you guys being here.
Billy.
Thank you, Billy.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate you.